Center and the Peace Coalition of Monterey for having me again this time. I always enjoy speaking to folks in the Monterey Bay Area. Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about well, the title of the talk is Race, Police, Prisons, and the American Gulag, as I call it. First of all, the reason that I'm doing this topic, which is not actually an area of my expertise, but I have over the years had some role both in observing as well as you know, participating in policing and the whole question of the criminal justice system. And all of this, of course, has been elevated in these this unprecedented time. I mean, we with the Black Lives Matter movement now for almost 2 months, and this is really an amazing moment in U.S. history. I've never seen the kind of mobilization that I'm seeing in the streets day after day, not only in the big cities, but in every city and almost every neighborhood in the area around me. I can't say that of the whole country, but of course it is nationwide, and it's an unprecedented mobilization politically nationwide, and it gives me hope that this is going to lead to the kind of revolutionary change. And by revolutionary, I mean that in the sense that there are power structures, in this country that need to be overthrown in order for us to address some of the issues relating to race and privilege. And what we have in this country, even though we went through what is known generally as the civil rights movement, even though it's almost 150 years ago that we abolished slavery, even though we've done all these things, we are still, unfortunately, living in the legacy that is a legacy of slavery. And the reason that we're still living in that legacy of slavery is because even though we have formally abolished slavery, even though we have formally in the 50s, 60s abolished segregation, even though we have the Voting Rights Act, you know, guaranteeing everyone, regardless of color, gender, and identity, who is a citizen, the right to vote. Even though we have all these things and much more, we have never really had a cultural revolution to root out the vestiges of racism. And I mean that in every sense of the word, not just overt racism, but the implicit racism, the embedded racism that in some way all of us, including myself, you know, internalize. And so it's a struggle for each and every one of us to root out that embedded racism, and the Black Lives Matter movement gives us an opportunity to do that, to do what all those previous accomplishments were never able to do, which is to uproot and purge that embedded racism, and as well as the institutionalized racism that's built into our system. So that's why it's important. Okay, so now I'm going to, let me put up my presentation. Okay. So this is my presentation. The image that you see, and this was the image that was on the flyer, you know, referencing the Black Lives Matter movement. This was a scene. Let's see, how do I? This was a scene from the first day of Black Lives Matter protests in the Bay Area, and you know, usually the first protest is one in Oakland or San Francisco, but it actually, the first significant protest actually happened in San Jose because it was in the daytime, and then Oakland and San Francisco had protests in the evening. So this was actually the first one, and it was the signal for the beginning of almost daily protests. And there were days when I went to 3, sometimes 4 protests in a single day, just to get a sense of what's going on. And I was amazed at how many young people have come forward and have started organizing, and have been able to organize so successfully, and sometimes rallying thousands of people. It's truly an outstanding, and I'm saying that thousands of people on a few days' notice. Okay, I mean, sure, we've had larger demonstrations in San Jose and Oakland and San Francisco before, but those took months to organize. This was just an outpouring of passion for justice, and it reflects the fact that public opinion, you know, has changed quite dramatically over the past few years. So one of the things that happened is that in San Jose on this first day is we had a day of peaceful protests. There was a confrontation with police when some of these protesters went and got onto the Freeway 101. And the interesting thing about that was that I didn't go there because after this photo was taken, I went up to Oakland to see what was going on. And the point is that as I was driving up to Oakland, the mainstream news media were reporting that the traffic was blocked on Freeway 101 in San Jose because protesters had gotten onto the freeway, and they heard about this, so they announced that they were dispatching reporters to that scene, and what that means is that the mainstream media did not consider this protest, the photograph that I'm showing you right now. The media, most of the mainstream media were not there. There were no television cameras at this protest in the daytime before the protesters got on the freeway, and so suddenly KCBS, among others, I listened to KCBS because it's an all news channel, and they said, okay, we're sending our reporter there to the scene, and they'll be there in 30 minutes, and it's tragic that the media only considers it important when there's a potential confrontation, and not when it's totally peaceful. Of course, that confrontation was also peaceful. It was a non-violent, but it was a civil disobedience, and they didn't consider, you know, what happened in the daytime important enough to send a reporter there earlier. So the question is, how did that scene in the daytime become this in the evening, even though this is the next day or the next night? The previous night was very similar to this. So I was in Oakland, and I saw the same thing in Oakland. And what I observed, both in Oakland on the 29th of May and in San Jose on the 30th of May, is that things remained peaceful until the police came in there and started to confront. And when the police take a position in the streets, and basically start yelling at protesters, saying that first of all they cannot cross this line, they cannot go there, and then they start picking up their megaphones and telling people that I as an officer of the state of California hereby declare this to be an illegal assembly. Now, how is it an illegal assembly if it's a peaceful, up to that point, it's a peaceful protest? We have a right to peacefully protest on the public streets and on the public footpaths. And how is it that they can declare it to be an illegal assembly? They never say what is the basis of that. The only thing they say is that if you don't clear the area within 5 minutes, we will use any means, including chemical means. This is what they said in Oakland, was we will use chemical means to clear the area. And I thought to myself, chemicals. I thought chemical weapons, even though these may not be 100% lethal, they're still chemical weapons. And, chemical weapons are illegal in war. There's a United Nations convention that bans the use of chemical weapons. And the fact that these are non-lethal, or supposedly non-lethal, doesn't make them legal under international law. But that's what they do. The United States, not only that, is the world's largest supplier of tear gas to the rest of the world. I've seen tear gas canisters in Egypt and in Turkey, in many countries where I've seen tear gas being used. So we are the largest supplier of that. So it happens. The defacing of property, with graffiti, which is fairly minor, but it happens only after the police confront. I think this is a very important thing to remember as a take-home message. I've seen this over and over again, that things are peaceful. There's no defacing, let alone any kind of damage that is done until the police confront, and then it sparks emotions, and the police firing these projectiles themselves. It broke a lot of the windows, and there weren't very many windows that were broken in San Jose, but the few windows that were broken were the ones that we know of were actually broken by police firing what are called KIPs. So KIPs are kinetic impact projectiles, so-called rubber bullets. And the so-called rubber bullets have enough of an impact to not just break a glass window, but to injure someone. I saw a number of people who were actually hit by a KIP in the area of the eye, and they had very severe bruises, bleeding, subcutaneous bleeding, and it's very fortunate that none of those people lost their eyes, but this happened, and then they also used the flashbang grenades and the tear gas that you see here. The other thing to note here is that you see that tall vehicle in the center right. That tall vehicle in the center right is an armored vehicle, and it's used by the tactical squad. And they never used it. There were two of them actually. There were two of them on the 29th and the 30th, and it's just not clear why they bring these things into these areas to sort of confirm that this is a war zone. We're not at war. We're peaceful protesters. There's no reason to bring an armored armored vehicle into the area. Now these armored vehicles have a hole on the top and a shield, which you can partly see that shield. So a police officer can actually go into that hole on top behind the shield and start firing from that turret. I mean, that's the kind of vehicle that it is. So we're talking about the militarization, and I would say the over-militarization of police. And it's not just big cities like San Jose and Oakland that have these armored vehicles, but small towns like Campbell, like Santa Clara, have acquired these vehicles. Sometimes they buy them. Sometimes the Department of Homeland Security says, okay, we have too many of these vehicles that we received from the Department of Defense, and we're ready to give them away to local police forces. And so police forces might just say, well, this is a freebie, so we'll take it. And then there's a pushback from the community, and then a number of communities have been forced to return them because the community didn't want them. So, but this is what's going on across the country. So we see police running around with weapons that we normally don't see, such as the kinetic impact guns, and this is a scene here of my arrest. So I was arrested a week later, and my crime was doing a light show on City Hall with a laser pointer. So there were at least two of us who were doing the light show, and but a plainclothes police officer who was in the plaza spotted me. Actually, he came to me and said, "Okay, so don't point that at the sky." And I said, "Okay," and I put it away. So the light show lasted for less than a minute, and about 20 minutes later, about a dozen police officers, 6 police vehicles, converged on City Hall Plaza and arrested me. And they charged me with aiming the laser at the police helicopter, which would never happened. But I spoke to some friends who have experience in police work, and one of them told me that the reason that the police are so alarmed every time they see a laser dot is because they always think the worst. They always it's the same thing that when a police officer sees a civilian with a hammer or a knife, their brains imagine that it's a gun, and it's a weapon that is ready to attack the police officer, even though the person is not acting in a way that they want to use whatever they're holding in their hand as a weapon. But there are so many times when there's a police killing, and then the police officer testifies that, well, he thought it was a gun, and then but the video shows that it was not a gun. It was a toy or a knife or something else, or a cell phone. Yes. So what they see in a laser dot is they assume the worst, that okay, it's a laser gun sight, and so somebody's getting ready to shoot at the helicopter. I mean, it's totally ludicrous to have this response, to use 12 police officers in an operation that actually took place at a fairly high command level within the San Jose PD to come in here and arrest me as an artist for doing a light show. But that's what it amounts to, and that's why, this is a minor thing compared to police killings. This is minor, right? I only lost 1 day of my life, okay, by being in jail. And I got, as John Lewis said, I got into some good trouble, but it was necessary trouble. It was necessary trouble because I was part of the protest, and it's very important to always keep in mind that when police charge protesters, political protesters, it's always important to keep in mind the context in which they were arrested. It's not just that incident, it's the fact that this is a political protest, this is a political struggle. And but it illustrates how the police spend most of their time harassing the community, doing things that the community doesn't need. Arresting me does not make the community safer. This is not a public safety issue. Okay, what it boils down to is harassment. What it boils down to is suppression of protest. So, I'm joining the call for that has been issued elsewhere to drop the charges against all nonviolent Black Lives Matter protesters everywhere in the country. This is something that should happen. This does not require any thought. These protesters were engaging in a First Amendment right, and they're peaceful. They have done no harm, and there's no reason why they should be charged. Now, I just want to mention that how the Black Lives Matter movement started in San Jose. I mean, it started in 2013, but it really became big nationwide after Ferguson. And the young people in San Jose who initiated it, and it was very small. This was about 100 young people marching in 2014, and it's interesting that most of the young people who organized this were transgender and a number of queer young people, and the leaders were not even Black, but it just shows that the young people had already felt so strongly about this that non-Black youths were really felt very, very passionately that they must respond to this. And this is so heartening. It's so heartening when people stand in solidarity and they actually take the initiative. Now, while we're on the topic of solidarity, I want to sort of break it down a little bit, because the term solidarity is going around a lot, and it's important to understand the different levels of solidarity and allyship. So, an ally can be someone who is not of the targeted community. So in this case, we're talking about Black people. And when we say Black Lives Matter, of course, the second category is Brown Lives Matter. So the second category is also brown people who are targeted by police, who are over incarcerated by the system, who are the target of embedded racism in this country. And so people who are not Black, and in the case of when a brown person is being targeted, non-brown people who come up as allies can say, okay, I stand with you, I support you, and just simply saying that I stand with you, and so that verbal support is important, but it's only the first level of allyship. The second level of allyship is standing on the front lines, of putting your body on the line. And in this case, we're talking about nonviolent protests. So it's just being out there, showing up for racial justice, showing up for the people who are being targeted. The third level is taking the initiative and actually initiating these kinds of protests. this could happen for any of a number of reasons. In the case of San Jose, only about 2.5% of the population is African American, and so in many ways, in many times, it is the responsibility of allies to take the torch and run with it. And then the fourth level is, and this is particularly in the case of undocumented immigrants, right? So in undocumented immigrants, it's actually dangerous. They are actually putting themselves in danger to go out and protest, let alone initiate the protest. It's happening now because so many undocumented youth are saying, I'm undocumented and I'm unafraid, and I'm going to do it anyway. But nevertheless, if they are afraid, if any of them are afraid, it's perfectly understandable that they should be afraid. And so in that case, it is the responsibility of allies to be out there in front, to be out in front, taking the initiative and taking this cause and making it public. And this is particularly true of the what we call the Rapid Response Network. So the Rapid Response Network in various counties, and every Bay Area county has a Rapid Response Network in case there's an ICE raid that's reported. I don't know about Monterey County, but or Santa Cruz County, but the idea is that if an ICE raid is reported, then there will be people who are not undocumented who can respond to that and be there on the scene, photograph what's going on, document it, make legal notes, and you know, show the people who are being targeted that the community supports them. I would even, and a lot of people don't advise this, but you know, suggest that intervening to some extent at a distance by distracting the ICE agents, and but whatever one decides to do, this kind of support is the fourth level of allyship. So just thought we should keep that in mind, that there are different levels of possible allyship, and everyone has to, you know, make an individual decision as to what level of allyship one will take. So this is some of the scenes of 2014 of the youths, and now of course this is multiplied by at least 2 orders of magnitude. Now, since 2014 to the present, and of course this graph only shows from 2018, so only the last 2 years. In 2014, the Black Lives Matter was widespread in terms of there being support movements across the country, but in terms of public opinion, it was still a marginal movement. And by 2018, you can still see in this graph that there was net opposition to the concept of Black Lives Matter. So what this graph is showing is the net support. That means the number of people who voice support for Black Lives Matter minus the people who oppose it. And so you see that before 28 or during 2018, let me see, or before 2018, so that line there is which just says 2018 is actually January 2018. So before 2018, it was negative. There was net opposition to Black Lives Matter, and that began to change in 2018 itself, and then with the death of George Floyd, it just skyrocketed, and so now there's a net support for Black Lives Matter of 30%, and So this is really a stunning, and this was a survey by the New York Times, a really stunning uh, transition. Now let's go to some of the background. The reason that this transition has happened is because the American public has been bombarded by, particularly on social media, but also on the news, with video evidence of police killings, and the fact that these police killings have were totally unnecessary. The black people who died were unarmed, and so this graph gives you some of the raw numbers, and it's true that there are more whites who are killed by police than blacks. But in the next graph, what we will do is we will take this data and we'll normalize it to population. The important point here is that the number of people who are black people and Hispanic people who are being killed, and what we're seeing for 2020, of course, is this is for the half year. So that's why the 2020, the red columns are shorter than the others. So basically what we do is we would double the 2020 column to get the full year for comparison. And so what we see is that every year there are a little over 1,000 police killings, and of these police killings, the vast majority of the people who were killed were unarmed. Now, if we normalize it to population, we see that black people are 3 times, and it was normalized so that we're talking about police killings per million population of blacks, and we see that the black people are 3 times more likely to be killed than white people, and the other thing that's very interesting is that they are 1.3 times more likely to be unarmed. And in a way that makes sense, because most of the arms in this country are owned by white people. I mean, like 10% of the population own 90% of the guns, something like that, and the vast majority of those 10% who own the 90% of the guns are white. You go to an NRA convention, and you can just look at the people who attend the NRA convention. Now, this is a chart of police killings per unit population in different cities, and on the bottom you see the list of cities, and I have colored in the cities in California, and then you see at the far right is New York. So what this says is that New York over the years has done something right to reduce the number of police killings per unit population. And the California cities, except for Long Beach, most of the California cities are in between. Los Angeles is worse than the Bay Area, and the Bay Area cities are at the low end, and San Jose is the lowest of the large Bay Area cities. And the blue X marks are the violent crime rates, and what's apparent is that there's no correlation between the rate of police killings and the rate of violent crime. And so what that tells us is that police killings are the result of police practices, police policies in these cities that have no correlation crime. And we know very well that a heavy police presence, an over-militarized police, does not prevent crime. It only allows police to respond to incidents, whether they be crime or protest or anything else. And the presence of police does not deter the crime. What lowers crime is how the community is organized, and we'll talk about that later. This is the number of people killed by police over the past 20 years in different states. And you can see that even though California is a blue state, we have, even if you factor in population, even if you take into account the fact that California is the most populous state, we still have more than our share of police killings. And the worst probably is in the Southeast in terms of police killings per unit population. But in California, with this, there's even though we're a liberal state, there's a huge room for improvement. We are not innocent. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is incarceration. We have in the United States the world's largest prison systems. Systems because there are many systems, right? There are the local jails, there are the state prisons, there are the federal prisons, and then there's the federal immigration detention system. So if you take all of these put together, we have about 2.3 million prisoners in the United States. Now, it's slightly less right now because thousands of prisoners have been released from the prisons and the jails because of the COVID pandemic. Santa Clara County, shortly after the pandemic began, released 600 prisoners. Alameda County released about 500. San Francisco released about something like, I think 400, 300 or 400. San Mateo County about 200. So, and this is just to minimize, just to try to reduce the amount of overcrowding in these prisons. And so when I was in the prison at all of the cells had only one prisoner. These were two-person cells, and no cell held more than one person. So I think it was successful to take nonviolent inmates and just simply release them. But this chart here shows the incarceration rates per 100,000 people of different racial categories. And you see that blacks are incarcerated at a rate which is multiple times, is more than 4 times, almost 5 times higher than for whites. Native Americans are incarcerated at a rate that is almost 3 times higher than whites, and Latinx community are incarcerated at twice the rate of the white population. So clearly there is a bias, and a lot of it we come to understand is just how police respond to people of different colors. They look at someone and the white police officers in particular, and even if they're not white, I mean, we're talking about internalized racism. So even police officers of color internalize the racism and react in ways that they're conditioned to by the racist environment that we live in, and so they react differently to a white person than they do to a black person. And I'll go into that too, because we experienced that on the streets, and so the police officer responds in a much more confrontational and aggressive use of force posture to people of color than to white people, and this is something that we can generalize. So, but anyway, these are the statistics that back this up. Before I elaborate on that, I want to talk about one thing which Catherine mentioned in her introduction, and so this is a Cinco de Mayo in San Jose back in 2009, and for many years before that. So this is a practice that had been going on in San Jose for decades, and it dates back to the time when Cinco de Mayo was a huge and a somewhat rowdy festival, and it used to draw over 200,000 people, and now it has become much more mellow. But the practice of setting up these arbitrary checkpoints in the middle of the street. Now this is downtown San Jose, and there are police cars stopped in the median, in the turn lanes of Santa Clara Street, and there's a police officer who stops these cars from the right side, of the, and then of course there's also another checkpoint on the I'm sorry, the left side. So he's in the median. He's stopping, flagging down cars from the left side. There's another checkpoint in the same block here on the right side, and so there's another set of police officers who are flagging down cars in the right lane, and this car has been stopped. Of course, it backs up traffic, but they don't care, and he has. I took this photo. I didn't know what was going on, and then when I took the photo home, I looked at it in detail and could see that what he's holding in his hand is unmistakably 3 California driver's licenses. Now, there's no reason to ask for the driver's license of the passengers of the car unless there's like an open bottle of alcohol, right? And nevertheless, he's asked for these driver's licenses, and this is 2009, was before San Jose declared itself to be a sanctuary city. So this is a time when people who are arrested, if they were undocumented, they would, and then they're being released from the jail. They were honoring the ICE hold, which is holding the prisoner, holding the inmate, or not the inmate, or the detainee, let's say, because they may not be in jail, but they may have been arrested and then released. But before they're released, they used to give an opportunity for to inform ICE that, okay, we have someone here who may be undocumented. You can check in your database, and if he or she is undocumented, we'll hold them until you can pick them up. And so that practice was still in force back in 2009. Now San Jose is a sanctuary city. Santa Clara County is a sanctuary county, and that's not done anymore. But the only reason for looking at driver's licenses, was to see if someone might be undocumented. And the fact is that 4 minutes later, 4 minutes after this photo was taken, the police officer let the car go without a citation. So that means he found nothing wrong. Okay, there was no broken taillight, there was no expired registration, there was no expired license, and there was no alcohol, and so the car was sent on. So this was a fishing expedition. And so I published, because I was doing this cop watch in 2009 and 2010, and each time I published a news article and reporting on the situation. The next year, 2000, well, no, so end of 2011, San Jose had a new police chief. His name was Chris Moore, and Chris Moore was holding a public meeting just to introduce himself to the community. I approached him after the meeting. I handed him the two news articles that I had published, and I asked him, "Are you aware of this? Are you aware of the fact that San Jose PD is having these arbitrary checkpoints only during Cinco de Mayo?" And he said, "No, but I'll look into it." And he did look into it, because next year, 2011, this practice disappeared. So this was my great success story, how one person can make a difference. And unfortunately, most things, one person cannot make a difference, and it takes a movement. But a movement, with a movement and a sustained movement, we surely will. No, I alluded, earlier to differential treatment by police, to different actors, different members of the public who are doing something. So this is going back to Trump's first inauguration, or his inauguration back in 2017, on January 20th, and there were 3 protests that happened in San Jose on J20. So the first one was the Rise Up March, and this one, I shouldn't say the first one, but it was one of the 3, and this march was about 500-600 people, and it was greeted by police on rooftops, and we couldn't see what equipment they had with them, but they had binoculars for sure. But they were, prepared for trouble. I mean, they don't go through this trouble of putting police on rooftops unless they think that there's a need for it. And then this is the looking down from the City Hall tower, and you see police with military bags there, and the person who took this photo said it's not visible in the photo, but said that they had rifles, so they were snipers ready to shoot from the tower of City Hall. And then on the ground, you had sheriff's deputies who had. I had a photo of one of the sheriff deputies with a weapon that is, we usually don't see. This is only for so-called riot control. So he has an orange strap around his shoulder, and that orange strap correlates with one of these special weapons. And I actually don't know what it is, but I'm told that one of the weapons that's used in riot control is birdshot, which sounds dreadful because the birdshot, of course, is used to kill birds. It also it's very obvious that it can blind and severely wound a human being. But anyway, this is the kind of weapon that was deployed in the Rise Up March J20. And this photo is from the current Black Lives Matter movement, but it's the same kind of, you know, non-conventional weapon. Now, that was one treatment. The police did not use actual force on that demonstration, but they did at another demonstration in the evening, which was what was called the Disrupt J20 march, and it was organized by young people, and there were about 50 young people who marched here. And when the police they let them march a little bit, and then suddenly they came up from behind, and they literally, without warning, there was no announcement over a megaphone to move to the right, get off the street. They simply came in with their sirens, lights flashing, and chased the marchers off the streets, bumping the tires of their motorcycles against the legs of these protesters. This is what I actually have. I actually have video of it, but this is actually what happened. And as a result of this this confrontation, three of the young people were arrested and charged. I had various video, and I gave them to the attorney who was defending them. The attorney gave the video and the photos to the DA, and the charges were immediately dropped. So that's the power of video and photography if it's properly done. And then the third case was the next day, the Women's March. It was much bigger, but it was organized by white women, upper middle class white women. And the police attitude was totally different. Smiles, waving at the children. It was like a festival. I mean, there was the difference in police treatment of these three protests was like the difference between night and day. And anyway, so that's the story on how police profile people, and in this case, march organizers, just on the basis of what they see. And that's why Black people and brown people get into trouble, unnecessary trouble with the police. Now, what we have in this country is, you know, we think it's the norm. We think that, well, this is the way policing is, and San Jose is no different from Oakland or Ferguson or New York City. But, you know, we are the outlier. Policing and incarceration in this country puts us as an outlier in the rest of the world. So these are our police at a demonstration in Japan, and they are in riot gear. They have these vests with a lot of padding. I don't know if they're bulletproof, but they have radios, but they have no guns. None of these police have guns. Here's a second kind of police in white shirts. They have no guns. And it's admittedly, you know, Japan is a different kind of society than the United States. Japan is a society where it's very, very difficult for a civilian to get a permit to own a gun. So you basically have a population, an entire population that is unarmed. That's the big difference. And it makes for a much more peaceful society. But it brings me to my next point, which is that what is needed, you know, we've had in this country a um, a gun control movement, which seeks to make it more difficult for civilians to buy guns, to make it illegal to buy an assault weapon, illegal to modify a firearm into, like with a silencer, or turn it into an automatic or semi-automatic weapon. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But there's another side to it, and that is the other movement, which is about demilitarizing the police. And I say that these two movements, the gun control movement and the demilitarize the police movement, are two sides of the same coin. And what they ought to do is join forces into a single movement that says we need to reduce the number of guns, the number of the power of the armaments in the hands of both civilians and the police. And if we do this simultaneously, the police will be more willing to give up their weapons. But I'm just saying that in the rest of the world, police, it's not normal for every police officer to have a gun. Okay, Egypt. So I've been in numerous protests in Egypt, beginning in 2009 and going up to 2012, through the Arab Spring. And the police that they use on the front line for containing protests is a section of police, of the security apparatus, known as the Central Security Force. So this is controlled by the central government, and the Central Security Force is 100% unarmed. They have batons, but no guns. There are local police who are similarly unarmed, but their officers carry guns. Okay, so only you have to be an officer in order to, because it's a major responsibility to take the decision of using a gun on your own population. And anyway, that's the situation in Egypt, even though it's a very authoritarian government, right? Here's Turkey. Here in Turkey, we have two kinds of police here. You see the blue helmets and the white helmets. And the blue helmets are unarmed, they have batons. The white helmets have guns. So what this does is it means that the white helmets who have guns have to think twice before they shoot. They also have a level of training that is above and beyond the level of training of the blue helmets. China. So this is Tiananmen Square, and this policeman is standing guard at Tiananmen Square. He has three things with him. Okay, he has four things. He has a radio. He has a shield. He has a baton, and he has a fire extinguisher. Okay, he has no gun. Okay, now there are some police in China who have guns, and those, like on Tiananmen Square, operate in pairs. So you see them standing guard along the footpath, facing at a 45-degree angle from each other, and one will have a gun and the other will not. So once again, it means that the police officer who has the gun has to think twice before he uses it. Um, now you say, okay, Beijing is the capital city. Everybody can see the capital city. So let's go to the part of China which has the highest level of policing, right? The highest level of policing in the country right now is in Xinjiang. So Xinjiang is the province in the far west, which has an uprising that has resulted in numerous terrorist bombings, not only in Xinjiang but even projected into other provinces. And China has been eager to put down this kind of terrorism. There is a Uyghur minority there, and the Uyghurs are the largest minority in Xinjiang province. And just for context, it's important to point out that China has this policy of giving a certain amount of autonomy, providing certain privileges to the 55 minority nationalities in China, such as exemption from the family planning program, the one-child limit that used to be in force for many years, promotion of culture and so forth, and the Uyghurs had been fighting this rebellion for independence of Xinjiang province, sort of following along the lines of the Tibetan independence movement. And there's something like 100,000 of them who have gone to Turkey, and they are have been some of the largest groups of fighters who have gone to fight with ISIS and other jihadi groups in Syria. And anyway, so that's sort of the global context. So policing there is intense, and the police in Xinjiang, at least in the city of Kashgar, which I visited just a few months ago, patrol in triplets. So they're always in threes, and each one of these police officers is equipped with something different. So one has a gun, one has a shield, and one has a baton. So they have to work together. And this arrangement reduces, as opposed to having each police officer carry a gun, reduces the probability of a police action resulting in killing someone, right? So, but that's in the place which is the most intensely policed area in all of China. North Korea. So North Korea, now these are officers. These are officers who are on their way to a security checkpoint, and what they're going to do is they have the metal detecting wands, and so they are on their way to a checkpoint to where people attending a national parade are to enter the viewing area. And you see that I show this picture only because I want you to see that they have a gun, and that gun is mounted on a brown belt. Okay, so just keep that in mind, the brown belt on their uniform. Now this is the way that North Korean police actually patrol. This is a routine patrol, and they always are in pairs, and one has a belt, the other one doesn't. And so one has a gun, the other one does not have a gun. So once again, the one who has a gun has to think twice before he uses it. So the United States, and of course in Europe, in Western Europe, anyone who's been to Western Europe knows that most of the police in Western Europe do not carry guns, and so the United States is an outlier in giving so many guns to its police. Now, one of the slogans of the Black Lives Matter movement has been defund the police. And I want to talk about this a little bit because I think it's worth delving a little into this a little bit. And the question is it realistic to defund the police? And then the secondary question is it realistic to disband a police department? So first of all, with respect to defunding, the way I look at it is that defunding is the beginning of the discussion. It's only the beginning. And the idea is this, is that if we can begin the discussion by having a simple vote of the city council to take a small portion of the police budget, which in every city is the lion's share of the city budget. Okay, it can be up to more than 50% of the entire budget for a city. Typically it's about 40, somewhere between, around high 30s, low 40s in terms of percentage of a city budget. And so taking a little bit of that funding and redirecting it to, for example, mental health services, okay, to drug abatement programs, to other kinds of social services, to housing the homeless, would go a long way towards, alleviating stresses in the society, reducing tensions, reducing crime. And so that's why that's the beginning of the discussion. It's just the beginning. Now, there is further discussion about disbanding the police department. And the reason for that is because reforms have a limit. And we can talk about certain reforms, and I'll get into them in a moment. And we will see that when you really think about it, these reforms will reduce the number of police killings, reduce the amount of police brutality, but they won't eliminate it. And so something much more fundamental is needed. That's why we talk about the possibility of disbanding. And the Minneapolis City Council has decided to actually take this move to disband the Minneapolis Police Department as it is currently organized. There is a city in the US that has actually done that, and that is Camden, New Jersey. Camden, New Jersey is just across the river from Philadelphia, and it's a city of 75,000, so it's not that big. But they years ago had the highest violent crime rate in the country, the highest murder rate per unit population, and they said the current police department isn't working, so they disbanded it. They fired every police officer and created a new Department of Public Safety, hired a handful of the original police officers back and others, and then decided to reorganize it and combine it with the county police department and enlarge the county police department, and then it kind of got off track there. So they ended up with something that is better than what they had before, a much lower crime rate, a much lower murder rate, but kind of drifting back to conventional policing. So, but the point I'm making here is this. Camden, New Jersey is a pioneer. They succeeded in disbanding their police department. They succeeded in reducing their violent crime rate. And it's a lesson. it's a lesson for the rest of us to learn about how we can move forward without getting derailed. So even though it got diverted to some extent, it's a lesson that shows that this is possible, and we can do better. Now, there are a number of proposals for reform, and one of the campaigns is something called 8 Can't Wait, and there's a hashtag for it. Now, the eight points in 8 Can't Wait are important reforms, and each one of them will help in reducing tensions, will help in reducing police brutality, will help in reduce the probability of police killings. And it goes from banning chokeholds and strangleholds. A number of cities have already done this in response to Black Lives Matter. Require de-escalation. And police often go into a situation and they escalate. And you can see it in the videos, how police just go in and escalate a situation, force it into a coercive situation. Require warning before shooting. Police very rarely, in most of these videos, give any kind of warning before they shoot. Exhaust all alternatives before shooting, or beyond that, just using lethal force, like putting your knee on someone's neck. Did you exhaust other ways of immobilizing the subject? In most cases, that hasn't happened. A duty to intervene. Now, this is something that I question whether it could happen without disbanding. And here's what it is. So it's a duty to intervene is that if a police officer is escalating, is acting with unnecessary force, is preparing to use lethal force when that lethal force is not justified, the person is not resisting, the person is unarmed, the person is already pinned down, okay, and they're still preparing to use lethal force, it is the duty of other police officers on the scene to intervene and stop that. Now, the problem with that is that those other police officers have to face that police officer who is being overly aggressive every day. And there's this social pressure that inhibits them, that very strongly inhibits them from doing this kind of intervention. And it's also behind, what we say is the code of silence, where other police officers observe a police abuse, but they don't speak up. Even after the incident, they don't report it. And so this is, I don't think it can happen under the current system. But anyway, it's there and 8 Can't Wait. Ban shooting at moving vehicles, that's easy to implement relatively. Establish use of force continuum. So use of force continuum is a term that comes from the military, which is that the use of force is a continuum from nonviolent, from verbal to lethal force, to firing a weapon, and only use as much force as is necessary along that continuum. In a sense, it's a misnomer because there are steps. What I see is, there are steps along the continuum. It's not really a smooth continuum, but that's not a new concept. And some police forces already implement this, and then require all force to be reported. So this is what 8 Can't Wait involves. It does not involve any kind of fundamental restructuring. It involves procedures, some of which are already in place, that if implemented, will mitigate to some extent the police abuses that we've seen, but certainly will not eliminate it. What is missing? So what is missing, very obviously, even if we just think of it as reforms, is civilian oversight. And most cities don't have any kind of civilian oversight. Some cities like Berkeley, Oakland, have a citizens police review commission. And that commission has certain powers to investigate and to obtain internal police documents relating to a case. In San Jose, there's something called the IPA, the Independent Police Auditor. The Independent Police Auditor in San Jose is almost powerless because the IPA has no authority to subpoena documents from internal investigations within the police department. And the police department has no obligation to hand over those documents to the IPA. So the IPA is a go-to person for complaints from the public, but it usually cannot resolve a problem. So what's needed is a body outside of the police department that can carry on a truly independent investigation. Then I'm suggesting, and these are my ideas, is community training of police. Instead of police being trained by other police or being trained by Israeli intelligence on police tactics, and this really happens. This is true, by the way. What we would like to add is members of the community training the police on how the community views them, how the community views the police, and what we, members of the community, need from the police so that we can have more confidence in the police. We can feel that we are not being terrorized by the police. That's what I mean by community training. And then safety officers of the community means that most of the police officers in many cities do not come from that community. I still remember when 4 police officers were killed in Oakland, and that's the only time that we knew where these police officers lived. All 4 of them lived outside of Oakland. They all lived east of the Oakland Hills, in Orinda, Lafayette, and those other communities. And so they didn't feel part of the community. They didn't feel they had an obligation. They didn't, after a police shooting, they don't have to go back and face their own people. So that's a problem. So anyway, these are some of the things that I feel are missing from the reforms. But let's take it a step further. So there's another thing called aid to abolition. And this is part of the hashtag abolish the police. What does it mean? It doesn't mean that we abolish the police and don't replace them with anything. We have no public safety mechanism. It means replacing it with a community-based public safety mechanism. But here are the elements of the aid to abolition movement and proposal. One is defund the police. So reduce the size of the police budget, put it into social programs, put it into mental health, put it into housing, put it into education. Take police officers who are dedicated to high schools and middle schools, take them out of those schools, because police in schools only accentuates what's known as the school to prison pipeline. Then there's demilitarized communities. And this is what I talked about earlier. Demilitarizing communities means demilitarizing the police and demilitarizing the community. Demilitarizing, reducing the number of arms in the community and in the police. Remove police from schools, there it is. Free people from prisons and jails. So, as I mentioned earlier, the United States has 2.3 million people in jails. We incarcerate more people. We have the world's highest incarceration rate. It's just under 700 per 100,000. That's the highest incarceration rate in the world. There's only one country, and I emphasize rate, right? It's not only the highest rate, it's also the highest number of prisoners. So China and India, that have 4 times the population of the United States, have fewer prisoners. They have much lower incarceration rates than we do. There's only one country in the world that has ever incarcerated more people than the United States at a given time, and that was Nazi Germany. Sorry to say that. But we need to free people from prisons and jails because our system is overly punitive. When people are charged, they get hit by multiple charges, and so there are multiple sentences that add up to long incarceration times. The COVID pandemic has proven that we can take the nonviolent criminals or nonviolent inmates and release many of them. It's a selective process. They look at, Department of Corrections looks at which people are at risk of committing more crime, and then they made these decisions to release thousands of prisoners. Repeal laws criminalizing survival. So that means, policing that is like arresting homeless people. It's absurd that a homeless person is trying to exist, and they're getting charged, at least in some other cities, maybe not in the Bay Area. And but we have to stop criminalizing people who aren't committing crimes. Invest in community service and self-governance. This is what I talked about earlier about investing the money that goes into policing, invested in communities, as some people say, invest in the streets, provide safe housing for everyone, solve the homeless problem. We can do that. Invest in care, not cops. So this is aid to abolition, and as we move forward, there's going to be a lot more. I talked a little bit about incarceration, and when I say incarceration in the U.S., I'm talking about all the elements of it, including the immigration detention system, which truly is an incarceration gulag, because we don't even know where people are imprisoned. With the state system, there's a database. We can find out where somebody is incarcerated, right? With the immigration detention system in the federal government, they disappear into this gigantic system, and most of it is private prisons under contract to the Department of Homeland Security. And so lawyers who are looking for someone don't even know where an undocumented immigrant is being held, whether they've been released. And it's ludicrous to see that children getting separated from their parents and then the Department of Homeland Security doesn't even know where the parents are, or where the children are. Incarceration. So this is an open prison in Norway. And so this is they have regular prisons also, but what they try to do is again, there are different levels of risk. And if a person is a low risk, they try to put them into an open prison. And it's not because there's more freedom, but because, interestingly, so in one of these open prisons, the prisoners are not only have, you know, some of the comforts of home, but they take responsibility. So one of the things that these prisoners do is that they have to go out and buy their own food and cook their own meals. And that means, that's critical. That's critical because that means they're leading an almost normal life. They're making decisions about themselves, taking responsibility. And this is something that doesn't happen in US prisons. Okay, the meals are cooked, are there for you. The food is terrible, but you don't have to make any decisions about yourself because you have no choice. And you don't take any responsibility. And so when an inmate is released from a US prison after a long incarceration, they don't know how to reintegrate back into society. And so you have this high recidivism rate. So not so in Norway or Finland, because the prisoners, the life in prison is one that prepares them for re-entering the outside world where they have to take responsibility for themselves. This is the kitchen where the inmates in a prison in Finland cook their own meals. So I think what I hope to have shown is that the practices that we assume are normal in the United States with respect to policing and prisons are outliers in the rest of the world. It doesn't have to be this way. We don't need to over-police and over-incarcerate in order to control crime. But we need to have a very different attitude on how we handle that crime, deal with the social issues, and deal with the drug problem as a medical problem, rather than policing and prisons. In fact, policing and prisons are a band-aid. And this is a quote from Angela Davis, that prison and also policing relieves us of the responsibility of seriously engaging with the problems of our society, especially those produced by racism and increasingly by global capitalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharat. Thank you for your, wow, that's a great talk. Now there are a few questions there in Q&A, in the queue. Let's see. I don't know if you have visibility to it, Sharat.
I do, but why don't you, if you can pick them out, then maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, the first one is from Judith Oman. She says, why isn't anyone dealing with the major issue, classism? We have not pointed a finger at the plantation owner. If we do not stop the flow of money going to the top, we cannot divide power. So.
Yeah. So absolutely. So this is, I mean, this ties into, of course, the much bigger issue of the nature of our society, and class, race, and now even caste is coming in, because we have cases that are coming to the fore of caste discrimination because of Indian immigrants coming from India and practicing casteism. So all of these things are there. Now the larger system, there's a problem at two levels, right? So one is the larger system of capitalism. The other one is the policing and incarceration. Now, like Finland and Norway, Denmark, these are also capitalist societies. I mean, their capitalism is a bit different from U.S. capital. U.S. capital is much more, free market oriented, where there's a huge political pressure for the government to sort of give free rein to the free market, than is the case in Scandinavia. So capitalism is part of the problem, and then the police and the incarceration is another overlay on top of that, and that's why I focused on the latter. But you're right that as long as the economic system, the socioeconomic system, has class, and that class system, okay, is what is really behind the sustaining the privilege that divides according to race, ethnicity, and other variables, other social constructs. And in essence, here's the thing: if you actually look at different countries and ask what is the crime rate in a particular country, and how does that correlate with inequality in those countries? Or it doesn't have to be a country; it can be a city. Take for example Atlanta. Atlanta is one city in the U.S. that has a high crime rate per unit population, violent crime rate. Atlanta also is a city that has a very high rate of inequality. So even within capitalism, there are areas where geographic areas where there's more inequality. There are others where the inequality is less extreme. And so what we see is that there's a correlation between high inequality and high crime rates. In the world, two countries immediately come to mind with high crime rates. One of them is South Africa. The other one is Brazil. Very high crime rates, very high violent crime rates, very high, theft, burglaries, robberies. And these are the two societies that are among the highest in the world in inequality. So inequality has something to do with this. And if we had a system that were at least a mixed economy, if not a socialist economy, we would hopefully be able to dramatically reduce the inequality. And reducing that inequality will automatically reduce the crime rate, reduce the need for violent, well, there's no need for violent policing, but reduce the need for policing. So there is a correlation there, and something to keep in mind.
Thank you. The next question is from an anonymous attendee. He says, or she, I experienced the police reported me as W for white in my police write-up for curfew/dispersal charges. I am not white, and this is the only question they didn't ask me. They just made it up. I am brown and Middle Eastern. Is this a common practice among the police?
You mean to put a racial category?
Yes, that's what it's.
Yeah, it is. It is. So the um, I don't. I was trying to think. So there was a. I'm trying to think when it was that I had a police incident, and they asked me a bunch of questions. Maybe it was when I entered the jail, and then there was a form that they gave me, and so all of the answers on the form were items that I had answered. So the only one was the race one that they never asked me about race. That they just put an A in it, and so they they make their own decision as to what to write in that race category. And a lot of times the categories are such that um, there is no fit, um, and so if the racial categories, if there is, I mean, for example, there is no racial category for Middle Easterner, and there's either Asian, Black, White, Native American, Hispanic, and so they don't have a category for a Middle Easterner. Uh, you know, so so put they categorize according to whatever they can, or whatever they think. It's but again, this is part of the profiling, right? It's the profiling that determines how and has a big influence on how a police officer decides to behave towards you. It's unfortunate that there is a differential behavior towards people who are perceived to be from different communities. That's part of the embedded racism in our society.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Then here's the next one from Cheyenne. He asks, he says, independent oversight in San Jose gets only 1% of the funding of the San Jose Police Department gets. Police have qualified immunity to protect them from consequences, and unions further add to the disconnect. We must have democratic control over our public safety. How can we work toward that?
Yeah, excellent question. What's needed. So what we mean, this is what we mean by community policing or community public safety, is creating public safety organizations that are of and by the community. If we organize by neighborhoods and set up committees of public safety officers who live in that community, live in that neighborhood, and are selected by that neighborhood, then they will have a sense of accountability to that neighborhood. They will do only what that neighborhood wants them to do. And so this is what I'm talking about when I say, disband the police department, deconstruct the police department that we currently have, and create community policing. And that can only happen if there is organization at a neighborhood level, whatever that we defined a neighborhood to be. And it will address so many things. I mean, for example, the fact that in many neighborhoods we don't even know our neighbors. We will be forced. This is a radical change about first of all, getting to know our neighbors, and then working together to select neighborhood officials to serve us within that neighborhood. So it's a very different thing. And then what might happen is that there may be a very, very, very small citywide police department that is only used to respond to dangerous situations, like if there's an armed criminal coming in, there's an armed burglary, then you might bring in that sort of a backup, a last resort police department.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lin. Here's another one from Cheyenne. What do we do when the state has the legal monopoly on violence to harass and attack us? Journalists are not always present at these BLM protests to document injustices, and the cops always cover for each other.
Mm. Yeah, so it's, I mean, what the transformative change that has happened with the killing of Black and brown people by police is the fact that people have smartphones now. And so in terms of documenting, take it as your responsibility, your social responsibility as a resident to, if you see an incident happening, particularly an incident involving police, just automatically start taking photos and then starting to take video. You can do that on your phone. The key things to remember are these. One is keep a safe distance. Make sure that whatever you're doing is not perceived as interfering with the police officers doing whatever they're doing. If they tell you to step back, please step back. Sometimes police officers, and they've done this to me, they have told me to get out of the area because they didn't want me photographing or taking video. And I responded that, well, the police manual in the city of San Jose gives me the right to take photos and video. And if that doesn't work, then you may have to. So what I did, I mean, that time I was on a bicycle. It was part of bike party, and so the police officer told me to get out of there. So I took off on my bike, made a circle, and came back from another angle and started photographing. And so I was asserting my right up to a point, and you have to use your judgment that if it looks like they're going to charge you, then if you try to anticipate that. You want to anticipate that before that happens. In my case, I came back several times, and the police officer, the commanding police officer, said, "I told you to get out of there, get out of here." And then I asked him for the third time. I asked him, "What's your badge number?" And then he said to his one of his deputies, he said, he said to me that if you leave, I'm going to charge you with, I forget the number, it was 47.6 or some, the code number under the California code. And so what that was he was going to charge me with resisting arrest if I left. And so I took off. I knew he was ready to charge. So I was on a bicycle, but the circumstances were very special. I was on a bicycle. It was night. There was bike party, so there were 2,000 bicycles on the road, and the police officers were on foot. And if they got into a car, there's no way they could figure out who I was. So I just dove into a stream of bicycles, and the police officer shouted at his deputies, "Go get him." And they didn't move because they knew it was impossible. That's a special case, but but anyway, my point is this: is that document and do the best you can, but take care of your own safety first.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. We have Alchemy Monday is asking for resources for an ICE rapid response team. We do have one here in Monterey. The website is itfmontereycounty.org, and Deborah Clifford organized that in 2017 after the Muslim ban. So they give trainings on know your rights, child safety plans, and have supplies of red cards and also hotline. So that's what we have here in Monterey County.
Excellent. Yeah. So if you're up to it, get on the hotline list, and if there's a reported incident what you probably will do is when you sign up for it is give the location of your home or office, and then they'll call you if you're within a certain radius of the incident.
Dr. Lin, I have a question. You talked about the Cinco de Mayo and just presenting the information to the new police chief. I mean, that just kind of drives home the point that it's the culture, it's top down. I think it's a culture of violence. It starts at the top. But my question is about, we have a $73 billion budget for enhancing our nuclear weapons here in the United States. And can you make a connection between that and what we're seeing in our police departments and just the criminal justice system?
Well, I mean, the United States is of course the world's leader in terms of militarization. I mean, the United States spends almost 50% of the total global expenditure on military. Okay, one country spends 50% of the global expenditure. I mean, that's incredible. Why does one country, even if you argue for deterrence, against war, there's no reason why one country has to spend half. But from other countries' viewpoints, that's very threatening. That one country is so much more powerful than all the rest put together. That it only stimulates the arms race, because China and Russia, which the United States has made out to be adversaries, these countries are not, previously were not thinking of the United States as an adversary. They in the post-Soviet Union world after 1990, these countries wanted full integration into the world economy, and it is the U.S. government that has chosen to turn them into adversaries, and to renew the Cold War, to cancel nuclear treaties, and so we need to put this in perspective, and It's the same thing with policing, that police departments use up 50% of the city budget, and demand public support for police killing. The POAs are fighting hard against Black Lives Matter. They've declared Black Lives Matter to be a terrorist organization. Well, it's not an organization, it's a movement. And of course, it's not terrorist. We've seen that now. Everybody has seen that Black Lives Matter, after the police have withdrawn because of public pressure, that everything's peaceful. So the aggression is coming from the militarized side, from the US military, from, well, I should say, I mean, but more broadly, the capitalist state, and you know, the whole of Congress. The problem with Congress is that whether our representatives and senators are Democrats or Republicans in foreign policy, they're all militants. They're all militarists, and with the exception of a few like Bernie Sanders, and that's something that we have to change. So the Congress itself is not in sync with what the American people are thinking on many levels, and city councils are not in sync with their own constituencies when it comes to policing. So even though the public comments on policing in the city of San Jose were overwhelmingly for defunding, a small amount of defunding, 5-10% to begin with, the city council rejected it. So they were not even listening to their own citizens or residents. And the only people who spoke against that were a bunch of racists. I was shocked that right here in the Bay Area, we had 4 people. This was a city council meeting on Zoom, where over 100 people spoke in favor of defunding, and there were maybe 4 people who opposed, and every one of them used the N-word. I mean, that's how the divide is. And so it was shocking that there are people who would use the N-word who live in San Jose, but that's the divide.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have just a minute. Do you want to take one more question, or?
Sure.
Okay, this one is to do with police. What are some other common police gotcha techniques?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Gotcha technique.
There may be at a unfair advantage. They can. I'm not really sure of that either.
Well, so the qualified immunity is one thing. Is that the criminal justice system does not look equally upon what the police do and what civilians do. I mean, one thing that always comes to my mind when I think about these police killings is that the police always use the argument that, well, I thought the subject had a weapon, okay, and that's why I shot him. And you know, the converse situation is that every time I see a police officer, I see a gun. That's threatening. Should I shoot him? No. But the criminal justice system doesn't look at it that way. The criminal justice system says the police officer is in the line of duty, and the civilian should not be holding that gun. You know, or if they get shot, well, it's because they acted like they were holding a gun. And qualified immunity means that the police officer gets off without charge, and the civilian gets charged.
Okay, we're at the top of the hour now. Dr. Lin, thank you so much for this informative, insightful presentation. And thank you all for joining us today. This video will be, has been recorded, and we'll put it out on the Monterey Peace and Justice Center Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. So thank you again.
Well, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Catherine, and the Monterey Peace and Justice Center for sponsoring me, having me here. I always enjoy it, and thank you all.
Okay, thanks, and take care.
Bye.